Hello and welcome to Tuesday's Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, the podcast that brings you up to date with everything you need to know about what's happening on this miserable, grim, rainy July day in British politics.
Oh, cheer up, Sam. We're both going on our summer holidays soon, aren't we? Come on, man. It's not long to go now. My name is Jack Blanchard. Politico with me, as you can hear, is a grumpy-sounding Sam Coates of Sky News. And today, some breaking news in the last couple of hours gives us a chance to compare and contrast two rather different ways of choosing a political leader.
At 5:20 this morning, Kamala Harris accepted the Democrat Party nomination, which means, by my calculation, that contest was all done and dusted in about 36 hours. Meanwhile, somewhere around 9 o'clock last night, the Tories announced that they were postponing their result yet further. They're going to extend it until November the 2nd. So that's 102 days to go until we find out Rishi Sunak's successor. I couldn't be more delighted to have another new countdown clock, Jack. That all forms part of today's agenda. Is it the top items? Surely not.
We can't possibly have the Tories on the top item, but the nation is no doubt on tenterhooks to find out who will be the next Tory leader in 102 days. We'll do them second, Sam. Let's talk about what the Labour government's up to today first. They want to talk about welfare. There's a big speech from the Work and Pensions Secretary, Liz Kendall, but back in Westminster, there may be a vote on welfare that they will not enjoy at all on the two-child limit. So we'll talk about both of those things. Then we'll get into the Tories. We do at last now have a timetable so you can see the structure of how the year is going to play out in the Tory leadership contest. And yes, it will take most of the year. And then we'll go stateside to talk about Kamala Harris, who, as Sam just said in the early hours of this morning, says she's got the votes she needs to be the Democrat nominee, and it's all systems go for Harris v Trump in the election. But let's kick off with Liz Kendall, Sam. The new Work and Pension Secretary has her first big day in the Downing Street grid. She's on the broadcast round this morning, and then she's headed up to Yorkshire to give a speech on getting people back to work. What do you think she's going to be announcing, and is it any cop?
So I think this is, well, one cabinet minister told me this is going to be the difficult area for Keir Starmer over the next 4 or 5 years. Because the benefit,
I mean, there's a lot of them.
well, there is going to be a lot of difficult areas, but few have caused Labour prime ministers so much difficulty as welfare reform. Right back to Tony Blair in 1997 and some of the rules around welfare reform, the objections back then from Harriet Harman, who resigned from memory over a bust-up over welfare rules. Every time you go near this as a Labour Prime Minister, it's tricky, but the benefit bill is ballooning. And Liz Kendall is making this government's first steps into this agenda. They're quite soft steps at the moment, but she's doing so alongside a figure, a staunch Blairite figure that may unnerve some members of the party, which is Alan Milburn. Now, what Liz Kendall is going to do is she's basically going to say we need to drive up the proportion of people in work. She's going to set a target, an ambition to get 80%, an 80% employment rate. In case you don't know, the latest stats put the UK employment rate at 75%. So they want to get more people back into work. And she's going to say she's going to do it by endorsing the ideas in a plan by Alan Milburn, who's launching his Pathways to Work Commission report. And what that essentially says is that for the last few years, getting back into work has meant increasingly punishing people who don't work enough or don't work at all. And instead, what they want to do, instead of tying job centres up in knots, issuing sanctions and administering those and trying to check up on people's behaviour, they're going to integrate the sort of health service, local health boards into the job service and job centre system. Now, that is a good and worthy ambition, but it is going to be tricky and crucially, it's going to be costly and slow. And in the end, at the heart of this plan, what's missing is what happens if people still don't do what the job centre wants them to do and resist working at all or as much as the job centre wants them to do. Questions that I'm sure we will address further down the line. But there are some in this government who believe that this needs to be tackled as a matter of urgency simply because of the steep line that these bits of the sort of benefit spending are increasing by such a rate that something needs to happen quickly.
Yeah, Labour adding this to the list of things they're going to be blaming the Tories for, bad things that they've inherited, one of them being Britain's ballooning benefits bill since the COVID pandemic, and lots more and more people putting themselves inactive to work, citing mental health problems and other issues, and Labour very, very keen to get these people back into work. Were we to hit an 80% employment target, that would apparently boost the economy by £23 billion, improve public finances by £8 billion. You can see why a government that's supposed to be targeting growth wants to do that. The problem is Britain hasn't had an 80% employment rate, certainly in my lifetime or your lifetime, Sam, for many, many, many decades. I have no idea when Britain last had an 80% employment record. That is an extremely high target. Never happened under all the boom years of New Labour, nor under the Tories in the 90s, nor as far back as I can see, and probably at some point. But it's a massively high ambition to be setting, and the sorts of things that Liz Kendall's talking about today don't sound like they're likely to achieve them on their own. Talking about more devolution of back-to-work schemes. Great, Labour are very keen to talk about devolution, talking about a white paper, jobs and careers service. These are all very Starmerite managerial tinkerings, but they don't sound like the sort of big bazooka that's likely to push Britain's employment rate to sort of stratospheric levels, which historically this target would be. So let's see how successful this is going to be. But Labour very keen to take it on, and indeed to blame the Tories for the current situation we find themselves in. However, Sam, while Keir Starmer wants to talk about getting people back to work and off welfare, back in Westminster there are lots of Labour MPs who want to talk about a very different welfare issue, which is the 2-child limit on benefits. And in the King's speech today, there are various amendments put forward calling on the government to scrap that cap. And the question is, are we going to see a Labour rebellion for the first time in the House of Commons today? We currently have 18 left-wing Labour MPs who have signed a Labour amendment calling for the cap to be scrapped. It's been put forward by Kim Johnson. She's a Merseyside MP. The expectation is that the Commons Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, will not choose that amendment for a vote today, because they tend to pick amendments of opposition parties for King's Speech rather than backbenchers of the own government, not unreasonably. However, there are other amendments available that Lindsay Hoyle could pick. The SNP one is a straightforward, let's scrap the cap. The Lib Dems want it scrapped too, although their amendment is wrapped up with all sorts of other Lib Dem policies as well. And so the question is, which of these amendments is Speaker Hoyle going to choose today? And will it be one that triggers a Labour rebellion? And how much of a sort of a threat to Keir Starmer's authority is that? I mean, to be clear, Keir Starmer has a colossal majority. As we know, he is not going to be losing any votes in the House of Commons anytime soon. But obviously not a great look for the Prime Minister if in the very first vote he has in the House of Commons, a significant number of his MPs rebel against it. So that is definitely one to watch for this afternoon.
There is something a little confusing, if I'm being completely honest. So it felt yesterday as if there was a bit of a softening of language by Keir Starmer and by Bridget Phillipson around this issue. And it looks as if the Labour leadership just want to make clear, particularly with what Keir Starmer was saying in Farnborough yesterday morning, wants to make clear that they totally understand and want to get rid of this cap as quickly as possible when the finances allow. And to that end, last week we saw a commission set up involving Liz Kendall, Work and Pension Secretary, and Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, to look at this issue and look at the levers around poverty. But the thing is, Jack, everybody agrees. Everybody in Labour seems to agree that they'd like to get rid of this. But they campaigned on a manifesto saying that they weren't going to because they couldn't afford it. And when it came up on Sunday, Chancellor Rachel Reeves said, well, we don't have the $3 billion that you need, and we're not going to make a spending commitment without funding. So the issue isn't that anybody in Labour thinks that they should keep that cap in place. It is simply that they don't have the money to do it. So I'm a bit surprised that Keir Starmer leaned so heavily into sounding like he wanted to get rid of it, given just how clear Rachel Reeves was on Sunday. And I just wonder whether some in the Treasury are a little nervous about the way Keir Starmer leans into sort of tiptoeing down making spending promises, and whether that augurs for a tricky time in the future.
I cannot conceive that we will get to the end of this Parliament and this cap is still in place. It is so hated by Labour MPs right across the spectrum. It might be that it's 18 very, very left-wing Labour MPs who've signed this amendment and who may vote for an SNP amendment in the King's speech today in order to make their displeasure clear. But let's be clear, it is MPs right across the party who hate this benefit cap, and I would be astonished, honestly, if we get to 2029 and it's still in place.
I would agree with that. All I'd say is, once they've given in on this, there'll be a next thing and a next thing and a next thing that, you know, a large number of Labour MPs want more spending on. This is the Parliament where spending is going to be tough, and where the Treasury and the whips are going to have to face down their own sides and say, you can't have everything that you want. And where do you draw the line? They sucked up the pain on this in the election campaign by making it a very clear manifesto point that they weren't going to do it until they could afford it. And they did that for a reason. And it's just a bit weird to me that they're softening so quickly. Just a quick thing. All of this supposes that we're going to get any kind of vote on the two-child limit, but that might not happen because there are other amendments which the Speaker might call, including one on Gaza. Zara Sultana and other left-wing MPs have said that they want to suspend arms exports and to Israel and basically setting out a position that the leadership would be quite hostile to, I think, in an amendment. And there are dozens and dozens of Labour MPs that have signed that. There is just a chance that could be called, which I think would be actually in some ways even more inconvenient for the leadership.
Let's talk about the Tories who get promoted up the podcast today. Congratulations, Tories. Most of us have been expecting this announcement to come on Wednesday. Sam, you told us yesterday's podcast that it might come much sooner than that. You were spot on. We got the announcement last night that the Tory leadership contest is going long. It's going really long. It's going way longer than I possibly could have dreamed for. Aren't we lucky? The contest is not going to end until the 2nd of November, many, many months away. We are going to spend the rest of the summer and all of the autumn talking about the Tory leadership contest. Why have they done it? And do you want to just talk us through, Sam, exactly what the process is?
Well, I think what the Conservative Party did is they looked at the US presidential date of Tuesday, November the 5th, when their election is, and thought, well, America can't have all the headlines. We need some of the headlines too. So they've gone in the same. They've gone in the same week. They've gone with the announcement the Saturday before. Look, there's been a long-running argument inside the Conservative Party about whether or not to have a sort of quick contest that gets somebody in place in order to lead the fight back against the Labour government and to rebut some of the kind of charges piling up about how the previous Tory government left particularly the finances in a dire state, or whether to have a quote-unquote proper contest that goes long, that uses Tory party conference in order to have a bit of a beauty parade, and then puts the whole thing to the members. And it's that side of the argument that appears to have won. And in doing so, I think it's sort of blown open the contest. I have no idea, you can't see at this point who is going to emerge as the winner. So it actually makes the whole thing quite intriguing in terms of the final result. But what they've done is they've said there are basically going to be three stages now. The first stage is that candidates must be nominated, and nominations open tomorrow at 7:00 and close on Monday. So not a huge window there. At 2:30 on Monday, we'll know the full spread of candidates are probably going into double digits. And then what will happen is that over the summer, the MPs, Tory MPs, will whittle down to 4 candidates, the number that will make their case to Conservative Party conference at the back end of September, early October. And then once that's done, Tory MPs again, and just Tory MPs, will decide who can be the 2 that go through to the membership, and then they'll be able to vote up until Thursday, the October the 31st, and the announcement of the result will be on Saturday, the 2nd of November. And they've said only people who've been a member for more than 90 days, so that's prior to the election, will be able to take part, to make sure that there is a sort of insurgency from perhaps former Reform voters. Now, what this does is it puts Tory MPs at the centre of the process. It's quite funny. Richard Fuller, the chairman of the Conservative Party, grandly says this process has party members at its heart. No, it doesn't. it gives a double lock on Tory MPs to choose to make sure they're completely happy with who are the final two that goes through to the membership to be voted on by them. And it means that Tory party conference becomes just simply part of the leadership campaign, and that we'll be absolutely sick of the contenders by the time we get to November.
We're going to get this amazing beauty pageant at the Tory conference in Birmingham, where these 4 final candidates strut up onto the stage one by one and do their thing, and it's all going to be rather 2005, isn't it, Sam? You'll remember David Davis and David Cameron doing this at Tory conference back then. And of course this long process in 2005 where David Cameron did that amazing conference speech and had been expected to lose until he gave a great speech. David Davis did not give a great speech. The roles were reversed. Cameron won. The rest is history. The idea is that there is an opportunity for that to happen again, and possibly some unexpected, some would hope in the Tory party, moderate candidate somehow emerges and wows everybody and saves the party from veering off to the right. I think is kind of vaguely the theory. I mean, it all seems a little bit improbable to me. Is it more likely it just drags on and on and on, and then we have this crazy leadership contest at the conference, and then we get a leader in November? There's a couple of things it also means. One is that when Labour announced their first and massively political budget in October, there won't be a Tory leader, a permanent Tory leader in place to oppose it. We'll have Rishi Sunak doing that, as he's with one foot in California, or possibly just in Richmondshire, whatever he decides to do. But there won't be a new leader in place by that point to oppose the budget. And secondly, as you say, they'll be doing it in the week of the US election. Is that wise? I remember Ian Duncan Smith complaining in 2003 that he claims part of the reason his leadership was such a disastrous failure was that it happened he was announced as leader in the same week as 9/11, and he said, I got no lift, I got no publicity, there was no honeymoon period boost for me that other leaders enjoy. Well, that is going to happen to whichever Tory leader this is again, because frankly, sorry Tories, nobody's going to care who your opposition leader is in the week of the most seismic US election of our lifetimes. And so whether that's a really wise date for these party bigwigs to have chosen purely from a PR point of view, I would definitely question.
And it's a lot of Prime Minister's questions for Rishi Sunak to do as leader of the opposition. Quite how they twisted his arm to stay on for months and months and months, I'm not sure. But Rishi Sunak's given a quote promising not to quit early, which was the fear amongst Tory MPs. But he has decided not to. Very quickly on America, massive news overnight. We have a new Democrat candidate. What does that change?
I mean, it changes everything from where we were 36 hours ago. I mean, it wasn't certain when Joe Biden stepped out that it would be Kamala Harris. He did not instantly endorse her. Most of the party's big hitters did not instantly endorse her, but she has done a grand job over the last 36 hours of hoovering up everybody that matters. All those state governors who might have been seen as challengers. There might have been a sudden groundswell behind someone who's seen as more palatable in those crucial Rust Belt swing states. But no, they've all dived in behind her, and it looks now like the only race that matters is the race to be her vice presidential pick and on her ticket, and the expectation is she will pick someone probably from one of those states who sort of speaks well to those voters in a way that she from California, some would say, will struggle to do. There's lots and lots and lots of scrutiny of Kamala Harris in the papers today, lots of scrutiny about how she will go down in Europe. There's I'm biased here, but I can highly recommend an amusing read on Politico about the last trip Kamala Harris made to Britain when she came over for Rishi Sunak's AI summit last year and went down like a cup of cold sick with the British government because she decided to give her big speech not at Rishi Sunak's summit but at the US Embassy, where she set out a completely different agenda on AI to the one that he wanted to talk about, and wasn't massively appreciated in number 10, which certainly shows someone free spirit and free of thinking, if not super diplomatic in terms of what her host wanted her to do.
Although I'm sure I've been on trips with British Prime Ministers who've done exactly that multiple times. But anyway, we'll take umbrage on behalf of our government at that nevertheless. Okay, I think we're out of time. We will be back tomorrow, where I hope the weather is better. Everything else is cheery apart from the weather, so that ought to I hope that catches up.
There we go. All right, nice to see you all. See you again tomorrow. Cheers.
See you then. Bye.